sometimes our best intentions, trying to help people, can sometimes deliver surprises, some good, some not so good. We're having this discussion today on the request of many people. In actual fact, when we launched the discussion on a world platform, a global platform, to shine the spotlight on domestic violence, abuse, and the consequences of that, we never thought we'd get the response of people wanting to join the discussion, be part of it, to watch it, whether discreetly with their screens off and no name, or as an active participant. Caroline and I both have experiences clinically, personally. I bring a wealth of knowledge I've learned from clients and patients over the last 30 years, from scholastic readings and teachings and philosophy and moral compasses is probably the best way of me describing it. We hope that the following discussion will help you. We hope that if you're watching this with view to yourself or someone you love or care for, or it's part of a training program, or part of your psychology degree or therapeutic diplomas or degrees, that you will benefit from what's very real in the world, what's happening now, and what we're trying to stop or curtail or to save. Even if one person's life is saved, it's worth every moment we're investing. Well, how do I follow that?
You can do it.
Well, enough about me. MPAMind.com is where you'll find out a lot of useless information about me and a lot of good information. The reason I'm passionate is my third book I've written on narcissism, and the first book of the Power of Now series, which is a series of 10 books over the next 9 years we're doing. But the reason I've just finished an amazingly difficult case. I'm a legal consultant as well as a psych and a clinician, and it rocked my world at how absolutely chilling and horrifying the Black Widow, which is the name of the chapter in the upcoming book, how horrifying it was to be part of saving the victim. And also trying to navigate the path of the narcissist. And in this case, the narcissist was a woman. The man was very, very intelligent, very acclaimed. A lot of people think codependents are kind and weak and soft. Absolutely not. Codependents are kind and strong and loving and usually incredibly smart. But it spurred me on to write this book, but also to do something worldwide about having narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic behaviour be part of domestic violence. In my experience over the last 30 years, Tony and I have something in common there. We've both been practicing for 30 years. I started when I was 12, though, of course. But in my experience, codependents, when they've been abused time and time again, don't forget codependents repeat patterns, unless they break the pattern and come and see somebody like me. When they finally leave, or the abuser, the narcissistic abuser leaves them, they are so spent, they've got nothing left. And all they want is to recover and have some peace. I've got some nods from my co-panellists. It's just survival at that point, because a narcissist, people don't realize, a true narcissist drains and feeds on people. They take coldly, they take without remorse, and they never apologize because they never see the reason to. In addition to not apologizing, narcissists are also fundamentally cold They believe in their world, and the reason they believe in their world is how they became a narcissist. And a lot of myths are around about narcissism, and also in common language we use narcissistic behavior very loosely. But a true narcissist is someone that grew up in an overindulged childhood, so therefore they believed that the world was there to serve them, or a horrifically abusive childhood where they believed that they had to create their own fantasy world in order to survive. So therefore they created the world to serve them. In adulthood, that doesn't work, especially in intimate relationships where the patterns can continue. Another thing people don't realize about narcissists is that it's a very secret war. Narcissists are very charming to everybody apart from their partner. It's really, really chilling. So I'm passionate about this to bring narcissism under the umbrella of domestic violence. I will lobby for it. I will invite people to help me lobby. If you could see the destruction in this private war, narcissists are very charming to everyone. And what they do is they feed off of their codependent, their partner, in order to keep up this facade they've created, this false world. They know no boundaries. Narcissism transcends all race, all culture, all sexuality, all genders, all intellect levels, all incomes, and all abilities. So whether you're living in a penthouse, a project, a caravan, a tent, or someone's sofa, you can be a codependent and you can also be a narcissist. And we can all be codependents as long as we have love, kindness, thought, and usually the key element is a people pleaser, because that is the food that narcissists will smell. They'll seek it out. The chapter of Black Widow, it still makes me feel cold. It's only just come to conclusion after several years in arbitration and in protection. I almost lost my client several times due to the severity of the abuse and the games and the mind twisting. And I learned so much. I mean, in the chapter, we've changed identities flawlessly to make sure that the people involved are protected. My hope is that the MPD, Black Widow, goes to prison and stays there with the key thrown away. Not many times we get old in the game of therapy sometimes, and we have clinical supervision to support us. I doubled and tripled my supervision each month to manage this case. The amazing thing about this case was there was surveillance and we could see what she did. She would actually portray this thing here and say this here and do this here. But what she did was almost like a professional spy. It just illuminated the coldness and the calculation. And my client, my patient, my client was being ripped apart by this cold, ruthless, chilling, horrific murderer. And so many people have killed themselves at the hands of an NPD, either when they're with the NPD or when they've left the NPD. And the one thing I would say to everybody is please reach out to help if you're watching this or listening or you read the book and it really touches parts of you that are very difficult. There is another, I'm going to pass over because I don't want to take up too much time. And I think it's very important to do Q&As in these panels. There is a profile going on, and I have a wonderful respect for the press and media, but also we can only go on what we're told by newspapers and TV news, etc. But the biggest profile, bigger than the Black Widow that I'm seeing unfold at the moment, is Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And it's interesting because I watched the whole Oprah Winfrey video. I keep on in touch with the news. I've I followed Harry growing up um, as much as the press would allow, and his mum and his brother William, etc. And it's interesting how if if I could turn off my mind and just see it as a story and it's promotional material, PR, or a travesty for the people, that'd be great. But I don't. I have this DSM-5 and clinical stuff here going through my head all the time because I'm trained in it. It's like an artist seeing a red sofa in a green field. I see patterns in people. And it's interesting because I watched the Oprah interview, which I wouldn't really call an interview. I have a lot of respect for Oprah Winfrey. I wouldn't really call it an interview. It's more of a promotional clip. I mean, it took them several days to film that, and then they highly edited with the best editors in the world with Oprah Winfrey, and produced this almost cold delivery with an interview with so many inconsistencies in what they were saying. And then if you think about how these personalities, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, are being explained to people, we forget that Meghan Markle is a very strong person. She did survive LA and Hollywood. She did become very successful in those areas. And no way is she a quivering flower. And similarly, Harry is a trained commando for the Marines, has been brought up, highly educated in Eton, and a very kind, generous, amazing, charitable helper, and he takes care of people who've been damaged and hurt, and he advocates for them. And I don't know what the press are doing, but what I'm seeing in these is really Prince Harry as a massive codependent that was looking for someone to help him with his struggles, and Meghan Markle really being in control in some way, whether it's overtly that she understands she's in control or whether it's the world she's built for herself, I'm not sure. But it's almost like that toxic dynamics going on there too. And what alerts me to it is the inconsistencies in the interviews, the inconsistencies in the portrayal of the press, and also why Oprah Winfrey got involved in something that would be so tragic and also affect Meghan and Harry's children, because they're going to read and see all this as they get older. So I'm not sure. When I have a question in my mind about why is all this happening and I don't understand it, I try and start to understand things. And during that, I think Piers Morgan was right on the button when he said too many inconsistencies. I think is quite personal with Meghan Markle, but my thing is too many inconsistencies. It doesn't seem happy. It's portraying a nice, wonderful facade, but what's behind it? And that's why I'm going to pass over to you. These are two very high-profile cases, but again, remember that we can live our own private hell in a cupboard, a tent, a caravan, a back room, a classroom. We can have parents who are MPD. We can have a partner who's MPD. We can have children who are MPDs. And it's a very lonely and difficult place to be. So over to you.
I'm Carolyn Hobday. I like to describe myself as a reformed HR director. So I spent over 20 years working in human resources in some of the world's largest employers with some of the most internationally recognized brands. And I earned a seat at the board table in those businesses in the realms of HR. But these days, I do something quite different. So I'm an author, as you might realize from this. I'm a speaker about women's issues in particular. And I'm an expert in personal transformational change, as Helen alluded to. I basically spend my time talking about twats. Now, I know sometimes the question I get is like, twats kind of has two meanings. I guess in a roundabout way, I kind of talk about both kind of twats, but I guess particularly the thought that we get into toxic relationships with. And I've had a few of those. So my first book, as Helen said, is All the Twats I Met Along the Way. It's the first in my Twats trilogy. The second book I'm currently writing is called De-Twat Your Life. And that's all about how we deal with and eliminate the twats in our lives. So it's particularly great to be here talking about narcissistic relationships and toxic relationships this evening, because you know, a little bit like Tony says, I've got some personal experience of that, which I'm hoping to draw upon this evening for the benefit of the group. But I talk about twats, you know, how to spot them, how to deal with them, and ultimately, as Michael would advocate, how to leave them.
I'm asked this a lot. My answer is always carefully, carefully. There is a time to leave someone, and there is a time that's safe. My advice would be to find a best friend or somebody who can be very supportive, maybe a therapist if you can access a therapist. If you can't, maybe somebody on the phone, and plan your departure, because we have many tools that can be used to destroy a person if they don't plan it carefully and safely for them. So again, if you're watching this, listening, if you're reading the book, please do not do a knee-jerk reaction. Plan it carefully.
Thank you.
For me, the key thing when I went through my experience is about believing yourself. You know, if it looks like a turd and it smells like a turd, then it probably is a turd. And I think that we forget that at our peril, is that if something doesn't feel right, you know, if a behavior, the way that you're made to feel, if there's that sense of injustice, it just doesn't feel right. And that doesn't just go for narcissists. I think it just goes for any toxic relationship. If it just doesn't feel quite right in your gut, then you need to trust that and believe yourself. Because I think the thing that, the perpetrators do, particularly narcissists do, is they just erode that. They create paranoia in you, you know, that you feel like, both the guys said, you know, like it's your fault. And they are extremely good at isolating you. They purposefully isolate you from family. You know, the narcissist that one of the narcissists that I was in a relationship with, you know, definitely tried to isolate me from my family. And luckily I have really strong family connections, so that wasn't going to happen. But they try to isolate you. They try and create that doubt, that shame. They create that silence that you have, and not least what happened to me. You know, I would class myself as a well-educated, intelligent, successful woman, and I felt deeply embarrassed and deeply ashamed. So I felt that I couldn't sort of utter what was happening to me, which again isn't just exclusive to narcissists. But I think it's about that belief in yourself. Like I said, if it looks like a turd and smells like a turd, it is a turd.
That's a big one. I think what Caroline and Tony said is absolute number one. They will hurt you, and they will isolate a person from the world. And in addition to that, it is not over until the narcissist says it is. They will stalk. They will use everything at their disposal to attack. And it's a charming attack. It's not, if they would punch, kick, cut, do something, that would be easier to report to the police and say, hey, arrest them, get rid of them. They don't. They're very conniving. They're very secret. They're very manipulative. And so if children are in that arena, you have to protect the children. So if you have a narcissistic partner and they're the parent of the child, or in a relationship, or they're around them, we need to give the child a voice at all times, always, and make sure they're protected. If you choose to have a relationship, or you're trying to leave a relationship with a narcissist and you're just becoming aware of it, it is like an awakening. All of a sudden, things, it's kind of almost like, oh, hold on a second. I don't know why I'm in this relationship. I don't know what we talk about even. You know, this has to end. This has to stop. Again, be very, very careful with the children. If you don't have a strong enough voice, again, go to one of the agencies. There are many free agencies. There are many private agencies to support you through a child managing a narcissistic parent. And I would say, and this is a strange thing you will hear, but sometimes a child without a parent is better off than a child with a destructive parent that's not remorseful, because unfortunately parenting is about learning. None of us get it right. None of us. I'm a father and a grandfather, and I didn't always get it right. We do our best as we go along. But with a narcissist, they never own up to a mistake. They never apologize. So they never learn. It's going to be this way forever. So my advice would be find a way of separating them out from that abuse, because it's not going to change. And if you can't do that, find some help to give you really solid direction.
So my situation was different. So I'm not a parent directly, but the one of the narcissistic relationships that I was in, they had 3 children, and I write about this in my book. So I was a step parent, for want of a better phrase, to those 3 children, and they are the reason that I stayed, even though ultimately he did end the relationship. I stayed because of those children, even when things were really bad. Because I loved them, but part of his methods in the first instance, because I was childless, I couldn't have my own children. He used them as weapons. He used them to get me in the first place and go, look at this family and this family life you could have that you've not been able to have for yourself. So that was part of the method in the first place. But ultimately, I loved those children. I loved them unconditionally, as if they were my own, and I stayed in protection of those children. So that's kind of my experience. Very much as Michael has said, it is about trying to give those children a voice. I tried to protect them. Ultimately, like I said, he ended the relationship, but I was fortunate that those 3 children had between them 2 mothers, and I did have a conversation with both of those mothers at the sort of exit point for me from that relationship, really just to make sure that they were well and they were safeguarded. But sometimes, as Michael said, the only place to go is for external support, I think, because there are people that specialize, and we need to utilize that expertise.
And be mindful.
Don't do it alone, I think, is the point.
Yeah, I agree with you fully, but also it is criminal. It's not just about beating, slapping, hitting, using money, emotions, withdrawing, abstaining, and isolating a child is also very abusive. And if that is going on, then Child Protection Unit in your area is a free government service wherever you are in the world. They exist everywhere. And reach out to them, because they will help you in a very kind, thoughtful, and safe way, again, with the children. Okay, so the police departments in the States, they have a domestic violence unit, a speciality unit, you'll be pleased to know. What you're talking about is direct child abuse. Again, it's not about slapping. This would actually go down in court, etc., as child abuse. Now, I'm hearing what you're saying, and my heart goes out to you. I mean, it's awful what you've described, but unfortunately quite common too. And the beauty of it being common is that the police domestic violence unit are used to your situation, your problem. My advice to you would be to reach out to them and explain to them it's not the right time financially to leave, it's not this, it's not that, etc. This is where I don't want you to do anything, but you can even actually disguise your identity and just say, I need some direction, I need some advice, because I'm seeing this, I know it's wrong, I can't bear to witness it anymore. And how cruel, but these words, we think it's incredible. How can somebody say this? That is the mark of a narcissist. When you don't believe there's any reasonability in their voice, and you think, how can you be so scathing and cold? That is the mark of a narcissist. So without even meeting you or him, bless you, it's a tough one, but what you're describing is actually criminal. And you have, your first duty is to the children, not you. And I'm sorry if that comes over as hard, but my training is that if children are at risk or in a dangerous situation, then you get the CPU involved. But if you need to plan carefully and quickly, because you've got children involved, I'd reach out and see where you really stand within the law, and the domestic violence and the police department is the place to go.
I think I would build on that in the sense that I used to describe the first narcissistic relationship that I got into, that it was like having dementia, and that's not in any way meant to be disrespectful to anybody, who has dementia. But when it started, it was amazing because they totally love bomb you, and they create this feeling on you that you then believe that you'll never get again because it's so amazing. Mm-hmm. And that's what you end up missing. But as the relationship goes on and it gets more and more horrible, what I would end up occasionally was flashes of that amazingness. So the bits where they made you laugh and you had good times, I would be honest and say I never had the good sex with that person. But they made you feel amazing, and occasionally they will just throw you a little, it's like breadcrumbing, they'll throw you a little bit of that in so that you think, oh my God, it's back, it's all going to be fine, it's back to where it was, I'm going to stay with this person. And that's what keeps you hooked in. And you do have to sort of try and balance that out. And the other thing I would say is just a bit of a practical tool. If you find yourself ruminating, start keeping a log of that. Keeping a log of how much you ruminate, and then taking a look at that at the end of each day or at the end of a week and go, how much of my life have I wasted ruminating about this person? And actually really take a look at it and think, what would I like to be doing with that time instead of that? And start making a conscious choice to cut that out and doing something else instead.
I agree totally. What we have to be mindful of is that it was fake. It wasn't real. They put you on a pedestal. They created an illusion of this being perfect. And within about 6 months to 9 months, it's like a pregnancy, they will turn the table and they will be evil, rude, cruel. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how much money you have, how accomplished you are, how kind you are, they will turn the table. So it's the idea of being in love with somebody, not being in love with somebody. And all the time, this might help you change that pattern. All the time you're sitting there being a victim, and I mean a victim as in a psych sense, actually hurting, in pain, pining for them, not seeing other people, not building up on your life, not developing a relationship with others, isolating yourself, becoming depressed, miserable, like you can't live without them. Every time you have those feelings and those thoughts, you are feeding them still remotely. You're still feeding them. The best thing you can do to end it permanently with a narcissist is take back your power and stop feeding them. Again, the whole purpose of this panel is to criminalize narcissism in the world, because it's a crime. This person is only ever going to be your abuser. They're not going to change. You can't change somebody. So you block them. And if they are on your, if they're family members, you explain to the family members, look, I know it's your brother. I know it's your uncle. I know it's your daughter. I know it's your mother. Whoever it is, whoever the narcissist is. However, I can't have a life with them. So I'm going to unfollow them, but I don't want you to take offense by that. So you can hold on to some people that you have met and you do like, but protect yourself. You are going to be feeding them every single time you see one word or even a WhatsApp picture changing. A narcissist will change their picture regularly because they know you'll be checking that WhatsApp picture. They will use any discreet, manipulative avenue to make sure you're still hooked. And the only way you can get unhooked is to heal from them, realize it's fake, and block. So block every time.
Yeah, delete, block.
There are a few times with the world.
Delete, block, do all of that. So I mean, personally, I would say that at the end of most relationships, the thing that, particularly with social media these days, the thing that keeps us hurting and not getting over our heartbreak, even if that heartbreak isn't from a narcissist or a toxic relationship, is just normal heartbreak from a normal relationship, delete, block, remove. Yes, you can think, well, that makes me look a bit pissy, and like I'm taking umbrage. Well, who cares? Because if they're no longer in your life, like, who cares? But to build on Michael's point, interestingly, the first narcissist that I had in my life, I'm still in touch with his family, but I do that on text message, and because interestingly, he has no relationship with them because he's burnt all of those bridges. So it's interesting that I have more contact with his family than he does, but I do that through other means. And I think social media is amazing in some ways, but it's like the work of the devil in another. So delete, block, whatever it takes, but just move on.
However, there are two complications, if you don't mind me adding on to that. Number one, if you have children involved and there's a narcissist involved, block, but then you're going to have to reach out to the child protection unit and the police and the authorities, maybe court, to make sure that they do not use the children once you block them as the avenue of communication destruction. And there are rules and laws against that. So thankfully, even if you haven't got a pot to pee in and no money, the child protection unit are the best. They're more informed than lawyers. They know about social policy and social welfare, etc. They will help you. Another area you need to block, which is very tough to do when you just left a narcissist, is remember the narcissist knows your mother's maiden name. They know your first pet. They know your favorite color. They know all the security elements for passports, driving license, bank accounts, etc., etc. What you need to do is have somebody support you in it and make sure that your airline accounts, your driver's license accounts, your government accounts, everything is changed, and you do not use the same information you use when you're with them, because they will stalk you and it won't be over until they say it is. If you don't mind me saying, it's dignity. If you defend yourself against them, you engage in the war. There's no war if you don't defend. And the people that know you, they know you. They know it's not true. They know this is an attack. The people that believe it's an attack are probably not people worth investing in. So ride the wave. Or I always say to patients or to the press or people that I work with, even in courts, I say the best thing to do to survive is like a rip current. You go with the rip, you swim sideways until you're safe, and you swim back in again. As soon as you defend, you seem as bad as they are being. So dignity, I know it's tough. Dignity, quiet, have a good network of people that believe in you, and keep affirming yourself.
Yeah, I have a simple saying that I use again in many toxic relationship formats, but particularly this one, that's just don't throw the ball back. Because the moment you don't throw the ball back, it stops the game.
Yeah, very important. May I say that it's important. I know we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder, which is a very defined disorder. It's part of the personality disorder traits. It's very important with family members to make sure they do tick all the boxes of the DSM-5. Sometimes we can have controlling elements, sometimes we can have sadistic elements, sometimes we have all these. We might think that the jigsaw puzzles fit, but they may not. So I would say to the person that's posed that to absolutely make sure that they're MPD. And if you are absolutely sure, without a doubt, you've maybe consulted a professional to double check. I'm not being condescending with that, but it really is important to make sure. If they're an MPD, stop investing in them. Separate out. It's exactly what I said at the beginning of this panel discussion. Sometimes you're better off without a parent or without a child or without a partner than you are with that person, because they can destroy you. But do not end a relationship just on this panel discussion. Go and really research it. You've got Google, you've got therapists, you've got books you can read, and you've got friends you can talk to, if they absolutely fit and tick all the boxes, then although they're your blood relatives, you may be better off without them and be protected from them.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think it's about understanding where your self-worth comes from. Stop looking for approval from them. Understand that you're not going to get that. And as been said before, it's about them. So just make sure you understand who you are, and where your worth comes from, and do the work on that.
This is very important. We cannot diagnose somebody unless we've met them. So I don't know who your therapist is, but I would say it's cautionary. We can't diagnose somebody because somebody's told us what's happening. We have a complex way of formulating and going through 6-12 hours worth of work before we can really pinpoint where somebody is. So again, just double check. You're probably absolutely correct. But I certainly would diagnose somebody's partner, mother, child, or anybody on the basis of working with somebody. So that has to be made clear. I really feel for you. I've seen people's lives been destroyed, as we call it, the honeymoon period of a relationship. When everything goes south, it can be 2 weeks, it can be a month, it can be 3 months. My heart goes out to you, but there are two things you have to understand. You're not mad, and maybe people say, oh, get over it, it's just a couple. No, it was very serious for you. A narcissist will manipulate your core values and your core insecurities. They smell them. They're not that bright usually, and they're very, very insecure, but they'll smell them, sniff them out, and they will twist them. It's like putting their hand inside your gut and turning it. So yes, you have been abused, and yes, you probably have PTSD. The other part of that is complicated grief. When we are bereft from something we're not expecting, it comes from far left field, it can cause a thing called complicated grief. And I did some scholastic work in the University of Western Australia on complicated grief. And would you believe that the world conclusion about the best way to get over complicated grief is to get out there and have another relationship, because it puts the one that was so destructive and cut short and manipulative, it puts it in perspective. And that may sound like maybe you're not ready for it yet or whatever, but no, take your symptoms very seriously. I'm glad you're in good care. Reiterating what Tony says, pharmacology as an adjunct psychotherapy is a great thing. So taking a few pills for a short period of time can help you through the trauma, but it's not a long-term solution. You really need to talk through this with, I would say, a bereavement specialist, not a narcissist specialist, and work out how you can unhook and heal from being tortured. And it sounds like you were tortured, and it really is being tortured. And also bearing in mind that it was cut short and it came from nowhere. So, my thoughts are with you for sure.
I think one of the things that I focus in on, particularly just in terms of my own work and my own writing, is that deep sense of shame that we have, when we go through something like this and we're embarrassed, we're deeply embarrassed and we're ashamed. And that's in any kind of abuse. I think that's what they play on in terms of us, feeling that abuse and feeling ashamed and embarrassed about it. And I don't want to assume, but kind of a little bit of what I'm hearing is always a bit, I hear from what Helen's read out, maybe a little bit of shame of like, well, it was only a short relationship, but I'm now sort of taking medication and, needing help. I agree with the guys. I don't think it matters like how long this went on for, whether it was days, weeks, years. I think the impact can be just as deep. And I think that just get rid of that sense of shame, because the reason we're here, the reason that there's so many people on here, the reason that these guys make a living out of helping people with this stuff, the reason that we write books and we sell them on this stuff is because it's out there. And the exactly Michael's point, we've got to shine a light on it and criminalize it and all of that stuff, because it's a real thing. So I would say, like, shed that shame.
you'll be trained to be a people pleaser and therefore be a codependent. If it's such horrific parenting where it's cruel and abusive, yes, you can become a narcissist for sure, because that's what develops narcissism, is to create a fantasy world, a facade. You're never too old to be different. You're never too young to know it all. I would say if you're considering that question right now, you need to know what's behind the question. And it sounds like you're wanting to do things differently now for some reason. It's a time in your life that you think, you know, I want to be more aware, or I've been repeating patterns that aren't good for me. If it's not broken, why fix it? But if it is broken, then it's best to fix it. It will improve your relationships with everybody else, but most importantly, you'll find peace for yourself. You will not be peaceful if you've been brought up by a narcissist. They will manipulate you and control you, and they will make you feel useless and worthless.
I'd like to sit here and go, I think I'm an example of that. But, you know, it's not, I think with anything in life, you know, I think it's very difficult to kind of go, I'm fixed. You know, I think it's about understanding the scars, healing those scars as best you can, but knowing sort of where they are for you. But for me, where I come at it, and it's maybe a bit simple. I know I don't have the sort of the qualified background of the other guys, but more from an experiential point of view. For me, it's about knowing your standards. So understand what your personal standard is. How do I want to behave? How do I expect to be treated? You know, what is right for me, and setting that standard and setting those boundaries and not letting that be encroached upon. And I know it's something that I have to work on all the time, because I, you know, come from a background, I'm a people pleaser, and, you know, I've been in 2 narcissistic relationships now, and I know that I'm, you know, can be susceptible to that. But I think it goes back to some of those support networks that the guys have talked about. I've got a best friend who, when I say certain things to her, when I'm sort of getting into a relationship with a guy, my best friend will call me out if she hears my standards dropping, if she hears me making those excuses. So I would say, know what your standards are for how you should be treated, and hold them.
Whoever posed that question or statement, your kindness is okay and it's wonderful in the right hands. So bear that in mind. If somebody's not being reasonable with you, you need to withdraw your kindness a bit. And it's very important you understand that sometimes, I'm not saying this is your fault, but I'm just bringing awareness to your question. Sometimes we train people to tread all over us and use us as a doormat. We can, and if we're a people pleaser and we have no self-worth, or we're worried about, you know, upsetting somebody because we've been trained that way by our family or a partner or a child, or then what we will do is we'll be having no boundaries. And the first thing I do is somebody that comes to me for help, or actually in the book, is I say about boundaries. We have to put in healthy boundaries, because if you're with your boss, a colleague, a friend, a family member, a lover, whoever it is, and you do not have boundaries for self-care, where you say, okay, for example, a wonderful one is, if somebody breaks a cup in a kitchen and you go and apologize to them for them breaking the cup because it probably was your fault, you need to adjust that to, really sorry you broke the cup, let me help you clear it up. So if you're more the person that wants to fix the world and make everyone happy all the time and forget about yourself, it's a very big Catholic trait, I'm afraid, to live with guilt and pleasing everybody. But we have to look after ourselves as well. It's so important to have self-preservation and be kind. It needs to come that way around. Thank you for joining us. I think that the message I want to leave with you is be safe. If you've joined this panel today for a professional reason, we hope it's helped you learn. If you're here for a personal reason, something to do with you or somebody you know, always tread carefully. Nothing has to happen in a minute. plan, be safe, and try and raise awareness with people at this, and choose your moment. Don't do it in a bar. Don't do it when you're at a dinner table. Don't do it when. Choose a moment and say to somebody, I need 15 minutes of your time. I need to share this with you, or I've learned this about something and I want to help you. Choose your moment. And I wish at some point in the future, we won't need this panel anymore, because the laws of the land, wherever you are in the world, will protect people and see NPD behavior, not just somebody that's diagnosed clinically as an NPD, but NPD behavior is criminal. It twists people inside and out, it ruins lives, and it kills people. I can't tell you how many suicides I've heard about or been involved with in the last 30 years of practice. And that's why now, towards my part-time retirement, I'm writing about it, I'm lobbying about it, I'm consulting about it, and I go to the courts and I go to legal battles and lobbyists to try and change it. So if you can support us in that endeavor to make panels like this unnecessary in the future, because we have the full protection of the law, that's great. But as you can see, just by the questions posed today, we don't have that protection. We are trying to make it up as we go along, but be safe. That's the most important thing. Thank you. Sometimes, as I said at the beginning of this discussion, we have surprises when we're trying to do good or spread the word or shine the spotlight. After this conversation with Caroline had ended, I went and had dinner before we went back home. We're in transit. And I asked my partner to look through the video of the conversation with me to see if I'd covered all the bases, if I'd left something out, if I did a good enough job. This is about 90 minutes after it was filmed. Unfortunately, as we just ended it, and I had been saying how we really need to help change policy, lobby to protect people, up on my screen flashed a message from a family that I've been working with for some time. It was one of the children of the family saying, I need to talk to you urgently. And I gave the response that I was in transit, I'd reach out tomorrow, let me know a little bit what's going on. The next caption was, my sister's been murdered by him. And I went into immediate clinical mode, reached out to my clinical supervisor, Ruth. I made sure that I had gathered the information I needed, and I assured this person that I would reach out to them the next day. I just went into auto mode after 30 years. We kind of know what to do, and we go into that mode, whatever that mode is. It then hit me that just 90 minutes after this conversation, we lost another beautiful, innocent soul just before her 50th birthday, leaving behind 2 children, leaving behind a devoted, loving mum and dad, which I've had the pleasure of working with, and 2 brothers and a sister. In honor of Michaela Hall, who lost her life at the end of this discussion, who had been supported and let down by the police service, social services, the courts, and the person she loved, who murdered her.